It's Bharon with One Chiropractic. I have a new conversation. I'm so excited to have Dr. Laura Hanson with us today. And I met you, Doc, at one of Dr. Barwell's events in Atlanta. And we kind of just hit it off. You're a high energy, spunky gal, and I'm a high energy, spunky dude. And you know, we just really, I connected with you a lot. And I love your knowledge and your passion and your energy. So I'm super excited that you're going to be a part of this conversation. So first of all, thank you very much for making the time to be on here. But I always do when I bring a new guest into the conversation, I want to spend time on this session just kind of letting people get to know who you are. So as much as you want to share, you know, I'd love for you to kind of tell us your story and how you got to the point where you're at today.
Okay. Well, just started going to chiropractic school. That was even a unique story. I was really going to be an attorney. And then I had lots of experiences that just didn't say, this is the way you need to go. So I was actually working over in student affairs and just decided to start looking into chiropractic and said, wow, I really think this is something I want to do, because at that time I was a competitive bodybuilder and I really believe in the frame and the strength. And so it matched who I was. But when I got out of school and got into my first practice, had very traditional patients at first, and then started having kids. And I was like, okay, well, what do I do with these little people? And that's what drove me into the ICA's Pediatric Diplomate program. And from there, they actually asked me to teach neurology in their program. And I was like, okay, well, that's not the easiest subject on the planet. And I didn't want it to be boring. So I started looking what's out there. And I found a really neat program out of Chester, England, that taught me really how we could get completely wired up from the very beginning, each and every one of us. And that really changed my life. That brought in these essence of primitive and postural reflexes to the body. And I remember I had this one little girl patient that she couldn't take certain things. Like the pitch of my voice would literally send this kid into a tizzy. And so, well, what's wrong with that? And I got very intrigued by kids that didn't seem to be able to adapt like other kids. And so it just made me go deeper into pediatrics. But once I got into the primitives and the posturals, there are certain certain tests that you look at to say, that's a Moro reflex, that's an AT&R reflex. I got it, but the parents didn't get it.
Right.
So I, again, was on this search. How do I get people to understand that this kid is in either an under-aroused or over-aroused state? So now at this time, fast forward, I was actually on faculty at Life University, and one of my students kept going, you've got to go listen to Dr. Richard Barwell. And I was like, okay. And finally, one day I was just sitting there and looked up a video on him, and I go, oh my gosh, he's speaking my language. And I called him up and I said, can I come meet you for lunch? He was going to be in town. And he started telling me about the Neuroinfinity and the stress response test. And that was it. It was now quantifying if that person is under-aroused, over-aroused, and this brain engagement and power, but it also associated beautifully to the Moro reflex, because the Moro reflex activates three things in our neurology: arousal, CO2-O2 reflex, and the sympathetic nervous system. So not only do I get an abundance of information from the SRE, but I can also match it to what I'm trying to do in the pediatric world. And now it's been, I think since 2006 or 7 that I've implemented Neuroinfinity in my office, but I've even gone beyond. I would say about 90% of my practice is bio and neurofeedback. And the results that you get is just absolutely phenomenal. And I think it speaks wholeheartedly to who we are as chiropractors. You know, what really got me going in this direction, where some don't necessarily feel like it's real chiropractic, I think if you can understand how I got here, when I had a child that I couldn't do what I've been trained to do as a chiropractor with my hands. I've seen kids that they couldn't handle touch. They couldn't handle the click of an activator. So what do? Especially when you're young in practice, you're going, I don't want to get rid of my patients. So what is it that I'm going to do? Well, what happened in my brain is I said, let me look at the vertebral subluxation complex. There is a muscle component, there's a movement component, there's a nerve component, there's a histo, or that chemical component of the physiology of the human being before it ever gets to a pathology or in a pathology. And that is exactly what I started doing. Maybe I can't do a traditional adjustment to you, but I can look at your movement. I can look at your neurology. I can look at your chemistry. And when I could get a child who couldn't handle a traditional adjustment to the place that they could,
Right.
well, that's some real change that has gone on in the nervous system of that individual. And that's just a little bit about how my brain works.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love, I hear that a lot, that, especially in certain factions of our profession, that if you're not adjusting every time, all the time, then you're not doing chiropractic. And obviously everyone knows that I'm a huge fan of the adjustment, and I believe we need to come back to our roots and make adjusting our primary service again. But when you're dealing with the types of patients you're talking about, and with a certain section of the population that medicine has no answer for them, I mean, they're the ones that end up becoming zombies to medicine because they don't know what to do with these people. When we have an opportunity to really be able to look at the brain and use our cognitive skills, right? In chiropractic, we look at the body as a whole system, not as an isolated set of systems. Then, why wouldn't we, right? If we have the ability to do that. And so that's super exciting. So I also know that you had a personal journey, and I don't want to make you share anything more than you don't, but you've got a pretty miraculous journey with your own daughter, correct? And that really has shaped a lot of the way you view the world as well, correct?
Yes, it has. About 3 years ago, my daughter, when she was 16, suffered a severe traumatic brain injury. She was making a left-hand turn and was T-boned, and the airbag from the front and from the side literally impacted the brain. And she had 3 brain bleeds and then too many areas that they couldn't even count. So they called it diffuse axonal injury, which is the same thing as shaken baby. And when she, there's this abbreviation for medical teams that are working very quickly to handle something called the Glasgow Coma Scale. And it goes from 3 to 15. 15 is a mild traumatic brain injury, and 3 means you're dead. And when they arrived, her hands and feet were curled in, which means that it affected the entire brain. And they first gave her an 8 on that scale. And by the time she reached the hospital, they then gave her a 4. She was dying. And she didn't have broken bones. Everything was in her brain. And she was in a coma. And at first I was thoroughly convinced it was an induced coma, but it wasn't. They do a sedation vacation, and the accident happened on a Wednesday. The first time that they did that was Saturday, and she didn't wake up, and I knew it was real. And then after they did the tracheotomy, she started to wake up, but she had to relearn everything. She had to learn how to walk, talk, eat, toilet, dress herself, everything. At that time, I closed my practice and I became her caregiver.
Sure.
And I truly believe that God prepared me with everything that He's taught me over now 23 years was really for that day. And I am just getting back to my career as of February this year. And my daughter is doing absolutely phenomenal.
That's awesome.
She's a junior. She's on the dean's list. She's a totally different person,
Sure.
but she is okay.
Hmm.
And we both have learned so much from this journey.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you that the confidence now that I have in myself, it has never been to this level. And I am so ready to give this to the world because we do have something. You know, I listened to Mark Hyman the other night, and I think he's a great doctor, but they were talking about how, you know, how they were trained in medical school that we are just a bunch of parts. And now they're starting to realize in the medical profession that, wow, everything does communicate.
Right.
We've had this forever.
Yeah.
We were educated like that from the beginning. And if there's any route to get back into, it's that. It's to realize that we can look at the human body so differently than any other practitioner. And if you put the decades you've been in practice, I mean, you're specialist right there. So I don't think it's just the adjustment. I think it's about looking at the patient and really looking at the orchestra of how they come together and where are you going to go in to really make substantial changes to that human being. And sometimes they can take that adjustment right from the beginning, but sometimes they can't. So I certainly couldn't go into just adjusting my daughter like I traditionally did when she just went through a brain injury. So there, you know, I started off with light and essential oils and lots of prayer and pressure and anything to just start to put communication back into her body.
Right.
So it's one of the areas that I think in medicine, they're very behind in traumatic brain injury. And there's a lot of people out there that really need our help. And neurofeedback is a fabulous tool for that population.
That's awesome. Well, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to stop you there just for the sake of our time on this first session. And then we're going to come back with Dr. Hanson here in a second. We're going to dig into some more specifics of the type of work she's doing and how she's integrating it into her practice. But Doc, as always, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing aspects of your personal life. I know that's not always the easiest thing, but I think it's important for people to understand your commitment level and what you've gone through that's bringing you to where you're at now. So thank you, everybody. Tomorrow, when you get your next video, it's going to be me with Dr. Hanson again, getting a little bit deeper. We appreciate you. We love you. Keep sharing this series to other people as we continue to give you the tools you need to make neurologically based chiropractic more of a focus in your practice so that we can reach more people with a better understanding of who we are and what we do in chiropractic. So we love and appreciate you. We'll talk to you tomorrow.